I was bleeding internally on Christmas Eve while my mother screamed at me through a video call. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again," she snapped. "We've had these Elton John tickets for months." Her voice echoed through the sterile walls of the hospital room like it belonged there, cold, clinical, detached. My 2-year-old twins, Jack and Ellie, were sitting on the floor playing with an old puzzle set someone from the pediatric unit had dropped off. I was curled up in the hospital bed, an IV in one arm, my other hand trembling around my phone. I couldn't speak. Not yet. Not while her words were still crashing around in my head like a bad echo. "You always do this, Claire," she continued. "Always some last-minute crisis. You need to figure things out on your own. We're not your babysitters." I didn't even ask her to come. I had just asked if she and Dad could watch the kids, her only grandchildren, for a night. So I could have emergency surgery. So I wouldn't die on the operating table while they sat unsupervised in a hospital hallway. But I guess Elton John was more important. I didn't cry. That surprised me. My body felt like it was unraveling inside, sharp pain and my side fever pushing through my skin like steam under pressure. But I didn't cry. I think I'd run out. Or maybe I was finally seeing them clearly for the first time. "My name is Claire Monroe," I whispered when the call finally ended, even though no one was asking. "I'm 34 years old, recently widowed, and I'm lying in a hospital bed while my parents go to a concert." The nurse Valerie looked up from her monitor. She didn't say anything, just put a gentle hand on my shoulder. I think she'd heard everything. There was no way not to. I wasn't even supposed to be here tonight. The pain had started that morning, dull, then sharp, then blinding. I thought it was stress or something I ate. Maybe I was dehydrated. But it didn't stop. When I called my doctor, they told me to go to the ER immediately. Something about complications from the trauma I'd endured when my husband died 6 months earlier. A ruptured vessel, or a clot, or... I couldn't even focus on the medical jargon. All I knew was I needed help, and I had no one. I'd exhausted every other option. Friends were out of town for the holidays. My babysitter had the flu. My in-laws were long gone. James had been estranged from them since college. My last call was to the people who were supposed to care no matter what. The people who raised me. And they chose Elton John. I stared at Jack and Ellie, both in their little Christmas pajamas. Ellie humming to herself. Jack mouthing the word truck over and over again, because it was his new obsession. They had no idea what was going on. No idea how close I was to leaving them. Forever. And I couldn't stop thinking, what happens if I don't make it out of surgery? Who will raise them? That thought, that raw, wild fear finally cracked me. "I'm not okay," I whispered. It wasn't for anyone. Just the room, the air, myself. Valerie squeezed my arm. "My friend's a nanny. A good one. Worked in pediatric trauma. I can call her. Just say the word." I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to owe anyone. I didn't want to admit that I was as alone as I felt. But I looked at my kids, my babies, and I said, "Please, call her." That was the moment it began, not the surgery. Not the pain. That was the moment I decided I was done being invisible. The surgery went better than expected. They stopped the bleeding, patched me up. But I was weaker than I'd ever felt in my life. I couldn't sit up without help. I couldn't hold both of my children at once. I drifted in and out of sleep, unsure what day it was sometimes, forgetting what city I was in. Olivia, the nanny Valerie had called, was a godsend. She arrived less than an hour after that phone call. Warm, smile, calm voice, not an ounce of panic in her. She knelt right on the hospital floor eye level with Jack, and Ellie introduced herself like they were old friends. Within 5 minutes, Jack was babbling to her about trucks. Ellie held her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was the first time I exhaled. Really exhaled, and the guilt hit immediately. Because while Olivia watched my children and Valerie checked my vitals, my phone was lighting up with messages I didn't want to read. My mother's text started with cold silence, then curiosity, then anger. "You can't seriously expect us to rearrange our lives like this. You've always been dramatic, Claire. That's why people walk away. We're your parents, not your servants." But the message that broke something inside me came from my father 2 days after the surgery. "Your monthly payment hasn't arrived. Is there an issue with your bank?" "No, Dad. There's an issue with my life, with your priorities, with the fact that your daughter nearly died, and all you care about is your mortgage payment." It wasn't always this blatant. They used to be more subtle, quieter, that slow, creeping kind of neglect that you start to mistake for normal. But once I pulled back even slightly, the mask fell. And what was underneath wasn't concern. It was entitlement. Let me backtrack for a second. 3 years ago, when my parents decided to retire early, they didn't ask. They told me. My mom was exhausted. My dad wanted more time to golf. I was doing okay financially at the time. James had a solid job in IT. I freelanced full-time, had a few steady design clients. We weren't rich, but we were fine. They asked for temporary help, a small monthly amount, just until their pension kicked in. I said yes, because that's what daughters do. That's what good people do. Then James died. And I told them I might need to pause support for a few months while I figured things out. My mom started crying before I even finished the sentence. So you're just leaving us high and dry. We made decisions based on your commitment, Claire. That word stuck with me. Commitment. Like I'd signed a contract. Like their retirement luxuries were my responsibility. So I kept paying, even when I had to downsize our apartment. Even when Ellie needed occupational therapy. Even when I couldn't afford my own therapist. $2,500 every single month. No thank yous, no check-ins. Just automatic withdrawals and radio silence until something was late. And then came Christmas Eve. The call, the concert. The coldest kind of betrayal. After surgery, while recovering in that pale blue hospital room with the blinds drawn halfway, I started to remember things I'd buried. Like how they didn't come to Jack and Ellie's first birthday. My mom said she was getting a facial that day and didn't want to cancel. Or the time they visited and left after 10 minutes because Ellie was too clingy. Or how at James's funeral, my father leaned over and said, "At least now you'll have time to focus on work again." They never loved me the way I needed to be loved. They loved the idea of me, the daughter who pays, who smiles, who never asks for too much. The hospital released me 5 days later. Olivia drove us home. She even stopped at the pharmacy for my pain meds and some crackers for the kids. When we reached my apartment, I nearly collapsed on the couch, shaking with a combination of gratitude and rage. The silence of that little space, too small for 3 people, too filled with grief, felt suffocating. James's sweater was still hanging on the back of a chair. The kids' stockings were taped to the wall, never filled. I sat there, legs shaking, and finally admitted something I'd never allowed myself to say out loud. They don't love me. They never did. They love what I give them. That night, as Olivia helped settle the twins, I picked up my phone. 27 missed calls, 19 voicemails. My parents had moved on from annoyance to pure panic. We're going to miss our mortgage deadline. We need to talk. This is serious, Claire. We didn't mean to upset you, but you can't just cut us off. There were no messages asking if the surgery went well. No, are you okay? No, how are the kids? I deleted every voicemail. Jenna, my younger sister, reached out the next day. She was confused, concerned. Mom said you were having a minor checkup. Why are they freaking out about money? I told her everything, the truth start to finish. She called me in tears. Claire, I didn't know, I swear. If I had known, I would have taken the kids. I would have been there. I believed her. I didn't want to. At first, resentment is a hard habit to shake. But I did. Because she sounded like someone waking up from a long dream. I think Mom and Dad lie to us both, she admitted. They've always made you out to be difficult. I believed them. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I told her quietly, maybe this is what waking up feels like. She came by later that week. She brought soup and sat on the floor with the kids. Jack climbed into her lap like he'd known her forever. Ellie kept pointing at her earrings. I missed a lot, Jenna said. I nodded. We both did. That night, while the kids slept and Olivia folded laundry, I made 3 decisions. First, I hired Olivia part-time. She was the first adult I trusted around my kids since James. Second, I called a lawyer to help me rewrite my will. If something happened to me again, Jenna, not my parents, would be their guardian. And third, I blocked my parents. Phone, email, everything. I didn't want explanations. I wanted space. It didn't stop them. They showed up at my door with spreadsheets. They brought my aunt to mediate. They sent a mass email to the entire family calling me ungrateful and unstable. They told everyone I'd promised them lifelong support, that I'd gone back on my word, that I was abandoning them in their time of need. But here's what they didn't mention. They bought a boat last year. A boat. They took out a second mortgage to fund it, assuming I'd keep the cash flowing. They didn't tell the family that they skipped my surgery to go to a concert, that they didn't ask about their grandkids for 2 weeks, that they saw me as an ATM with emotions they didn't care to understand. But others started to notice. My cousin emailed me privately. So did my dad's sister. Even my aunt, the one who came to defend them, called me and said, "They lied to me, Claire." I'm so sorry. It was like a curtain had lifted. And underneath it was the truth I'd been too tired, too broken, too guilt-trapped to say out loud. Just because someone raised you doesn't mean they deserve access to your life. And now they weren't getting another cent. They were going to feel what I'd felt for years, alone. You'd think cutting them off would have brought peace. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was loud. My phone no longer buzzed with their demands, but I still heard them in my head, the guilt, the disapproval, the ever-present voice, telling me I was wrong for choosing myself. The days after surgery were the hardest. I was healing slower than expected. The incision burned every time I moved, and I could barely lift the twins without pain searing through my side. Olivia stayed longer hours when she could, but even then, there were moments where I was alone, curled up on the bathroom floor, crying silently so the kids wouldn't hear. And the fear, it was still there. Quiet, but sharp. What if I get sick again? What if I really can't do this alone? One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. Jack was crying from a nightmare. I dragged myself out of bed and limped to his room. As I cradled him, I realized there was no backup plan anymore. No one else to call. But then something shifted. I looked around that small room, hand-painted stars on the ceiling, a mobile James had built, toys scattered everywhere, and it hit me. I've already done everything alone. For months. Through grief. Through pain. Through surgeries and screaming toddlers and unpaid invoices. And I'm still here. I wasn't broken. I was tired. And there's a difference. The next morning, I opened my laptop and did something that made my stomach turn. I pulled up my bank records from the last year. $2,500 a month. Every month. $30,000 a year. Money I didn't have to spare. Money I sent out of obligation while skipping my own dentist appointments, delaying therapy, saying no to the preschool I actually wanted for the twins. And for what? So my parents could take cruises, so they could brag about early retirement to their friends, so they could ignore me, belittle me, and still expect access to my wallet. The anger simmered beneath the surface, not explosive, not chaotic, just steady, focused. I started tracking everything, what I gave, what they took, what they said, what they didn't. That same week, Jenna called me with news. They're getting foreclosure letters, she said. Apparently, they're months behind on payments. I blinked. Didn't they have retirement savings? They spent it. Most of it on the boat and some investment scheme Dad's golf friend pitched. I laughed. I didn't mean to, it just burst out. They thought I'd keep covering for them, I said. They're panicking, she added quietly. I told them I'm not giving them anything. They're furious. Good. Let them be furious. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. My parents, both of them, dressed in their serious clothes, slacks, loafers, expensive jacket. My mother had her designer purse clutched tightly like it was armor. I didn't open the door all the way, just enough to speak. What do you want? I asked. My voice didn't shake. Claire, honey. My mother began that sugar-sweet tone she always used when she needed something. We're worried. You haven't answered our calls. We need to talk about this ridiculous financial situation, my father interrupted. The bank called. We had to dip into our cruise savings. That was it. I opened the door just enough to step out. I stood between them and my children. You're standing here asking for money, I said. But you haven't once asked if I'm okay. If I survived. If your grandchildren are okay. They stared at me. We made one mistake, my mother whispered dramatically. You're really going to punish us like this. This isn't punishment, I said, it's consequence. My father's jaw tightened. We're your parents. And I'm a parent too, I said. I would never treat Jack and Ellie the way you've treated me. That's when Ellie toddled into the hallway. She clutched her stuffed giraffe, staring up at the strangers on our doorstep. There's my precious grandbaby, my mom chirped, crouching down. Ellie stepped behind my legs. She doesn't know you, I said. She's seen you maybe 3 times in her life. But we love her, my mom said weakly. No, you love the idea of being grandparents, I said. But when it came time to show up, you didn't. I stepped back inside, closed the door. That should have been the end. It wasn't. The next day, they came back. This time with reinforcements. My Aunt Marie, the family peacemaker. She stood outside the door and pleaded, "Claire, be reasonable. Your parents are struggling. They made decisions based on your support." I didn't open the door. "They made decisions based on entitlement," I said. "Not my promises. I never said I'd support them forever." My mother's voice cracked. "We retired early because you said you'd help." "You retired early because you wanted to live easy," I replied. "Now it's catching up to you. That's not on me." Later that evening, they went nuclear. An email to the entire extended family subject line, "Urgent Claire has cut us off." It was theatrical, full of half-truths and omissions. They painted themselves as loving, generous parents betrayed by their ungrateful daughter. They said I was emotionally unstable, that I abandoned them after all they'd done. But they miscalculated something. People knew me. People liked me. Within hours, I got messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. From relatives who saw through the lies. Some even replied all with questions. "Didn't you just buy a new boat last year? Wasn't that a diamond tennis bracelet at Thanksgiving's?" I didn't respond right away. I was too tired. But Jenna did. She sent a calm, factual message to the group. "Claire recently had emergency surgery. Our parents declined to help with her children because they had concert tickets. Everything else stems from that." That one message turned the tide. My cousin's wife dropped off meals. A second cousin offered free babysitting. A family friend from church sent grocery gift cards. People were seeing the truth, and my parents. They were unraveling. Their voicemails turned desperate. "Please, Claire, we're losing everything. We didn't mean to hurt you. We assumed you'd calm down and resume support." That last one, that was the one that broke whatever tie was left. They never thought I meant it. They never believed my boundaries were real. To them, I was still the same girl who flinched at guilt and bent under pressure. But I wasn't. Not anymore. The day I stopped feeling guilty was the day I started breathing like myself again. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow shift, like the light changing in a room you've sat in too long. First you notice your posture, then the dust, then how heavy the air has been for years. Olivia showed up every morning at 8 a.m. sharp. She'd bring little snacks for the kids and a coffee for me if she had time. I remember one morning I tried to apologize for the chaos toys everywhere, dishes in the sink, me still in pajamas with a bandage across my abdomen, and she just smiled. "This is what surviving looks like," she said. "Don't ever apologize for that." Her kindness was a mirror. It showed me what care was supposed to feel like. No guilt, no keeping score, no conditional love. Jenna came by, often too quieter than Olivia, more cautious. But she was trying. And I noticed. She started picking up groceries when she came. Sometimes she'd fold laundry while talking. The first time she stayed late and read Ellie a bedtime story, I had to hide in the kitchen so she wouldn't see me cry. We talked a lot during those weeks. Mostly about our parents, about the way they'd warped everything. "They always told me you were distant," Jenna admitted once. "That you wanted space. That you liked being on your own." I laughed bitter and small. I begged them for help after James died. They told me I needed to toughen up. Jenna nodded, her face hardening. "I see it now. I let them turn me against you. I'm sorry. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't, but I said thank you, because that was more honest." Meanwhile, I was working again slowly. My clients had been patient during the hospital stay. One of them, a nonprofit director, sent flowers and told me to invoice whenever I was ready. Another one sent a note that just said, "Take care of you, the rest will wait." It wasn't much, a few $100s here and there, but it was something. And then something unexpected happened. I got an email from someone in my widowed parents support group, a woman named Tara. She had seen the memorial website I made for James, the one I built one sleepless night in October, when I couldn't cry anymore and needed something to do with my hands. "It's beautiful," she wrote. "Would you ever consider doing one for my husband?" I said yes. It was the first time I felt real again, like my pain wasn't just weight I carried, but something that could be used to help someone else breathe. Word spread. 3 people reached out within a week, then 5, then 10. I built a new site, created a name, bought a domain, memory frame, custom digital memorials, intimate, warm, personal, not cold obituary pages, Not funeral home templates. Something alive. Something real. By month 2, it was bringing in more than my design freelancing ever had. At the same time, Diana, a woman in the support group, invited me to coffee. She'd lost her husband to cancer 2 years ago and was raising a 3-year-old son. She also happened to be a real estate agent. "Have you considered moving?" she asked, stirring her tea. I laughed. "I can't afford to move. What if I told you your apartment's value went up, and there's a 3-bedroom house in a quieter neighborhood with better schools, and it'd actually cost less month to month?" I paused. "What's the catch?" "No catch," she said. "Just a chance to start fresh." She wasn't wrong. The apartment was filled with grief. I saw James in every hallway. I saw my parents' neglect in every unpaid bill stuck to the fridge. I saw my old self in every corner I'd shrunk into. So I sold it. Diana helped me find a house. Small, modest, with a tiny backyard and peeling paint on the shutters. But it had potential. It had space. It had light. The day we moved in, Jack ran across the grass screaming, "Mine, it's mine." Ellie followed, dragging her giraffe eyes wide. And I just stood there on the porch holding the keys. This was ours. A few weeks later, my father showed up again. Not in person this time, but through Jenna. "They're being foreclosed," she said, not even looking up from the coffee cup. 60 days. They've burned through everything." "What about the boat?" "Sold it, for a loss." "The timeshare?" "Gone." "And the second mortgage?" She winced. "They're saying you forced them into this." I laughed. "Of course they are." But I didn't feel the pull anymore, not like before. They were falling apart, but I wasn't. In fact, I was rebuilding faster than I thought possible. Memory Frame kept growing. One of the memorials went semi-viral after a client posted it to Reddit. I got 20 commissions in 3 days. I had to create a wait list. People wrote to me saying the sites helped them grieve, that it gave them something beautiful to hold on to. That meant more to me than anything I'd ever designed. And here's the best part: with my new income, I didn't need to freelance anymore. I could work fewer hours and spend more time with my kids. I adjusted my schedule. Olivia still helped 3 days a week, and on the others, I blocked out time to just be. We went to the park, we made pancakes, we watched Bluey, and danced in the kitchen. I wasn't surviving anymore, I was living. That's when I knew my parents weren't the only ones who were wrong about me. I had been wrong about me too. I thought I couldn't do it without them. I thought I needed their approval to be whole. I thought love had to be earned and paid for, but none of that was true. I had friends now, neighbors who brought casseroles when we moved in, a mom group from the support circle who organized playdates. Even Valerie, the nurse who started it all, stopped by once with her own kids. And Jenna, she became a sister again. Not perfect, but present. She started spending weekends with us. Sometimes she'd take the kids overnight. Once she even painted Ellie's room, surprising us both with a mural of stars and clouds. "I never knew I could do this," she said, holding the brush. "I didn't know I could do any of this," I replied. 3 months after the move, I got a text from Jenna. "They're coming to your door again. Heads up." I didn't panic this time. I didn't feel that old electricity of dread run through my spine. Instead, I stood up, checked on the twins playing with blocks in the living room, and waited. Sure enough, the knock came. 2 soft taps, then 1 loud one. I opened the door halfway. My father was holding a manila folder. My mother was standing behind him, eyes puffier than usual, face tight. "We need to talk," he said. "About our house," he replied. I didn't say anything, just stared. He sighed and stepped back, extending the folder toward me like it was a peace offering. "We need $144,000. We're trying to stop the foreclosure. We've listed our debts and options. We're hoping you'll reconsider." I didn't take the folder. Why would I do that? My mother jumped in. "Because we're your parents, Claire. We've hit rock bottom. Isn't that what family's for?" I leaned against the doorframe. "What about selling the boat?" I asked. "We already did," my dad said. "And the timeshare?" "Sold it, for 1/3 of what we paid." I raised an eyebrow. "Still not enough, huh?" My father's face flushed. "Claire, these were our retirement luxuries. Luxuries you couldn't afford," I cut in. "We could. With your help," he snapped. There it was, again, the old voice. The one that demanded more, no matter what you'd already given. "You still don't get it," I said. "I'm not your retirement plan. I'm not your fallback. We're not asking for everything," my mother whispered. "Just enough to stabilize." "No," I said simply. You're asking for what I used to give. Unquestioned loyalty, money, my silence. That's gone. The twins toddled into view. Ellie clutched her giraffe. Jack looked at them curiously, not recognizing them. My mother's voice changed. "There's my precious grandbabies," she said, crouching down. They didn't move. Ellie stepped behind my legs. "They don't know you," I said, not cruel, just honest. "You chose not to be around." My father's eyes darted toward the door. "Claire, come on. We were busy." "No," I interrupted. "You were selfish, that's the truth." He looked like he wanted to shout, but didn't know how to shout at someone who wasn't afraid anymore. "Please," my mother said, her voice cracking. "Without your help, we'll lose everything." I swallowed. I already lost everything I said, my husband, my security, my sense of safety. I rebuilt from that. You can rebuild too. I closed the door. Not with force, just finality. They lost the house 60 days later. Jenna kept me updated. They downsized into a small condo. My dad sold the car he loved. My mom started clipping coupons, something she once said was beneath her. They told anyone who would listen that I abandoned them, that I betrayed them after a lifetime of support. Let them talk, because the people who mattered knew the truth. And so did I. I'd created something from nothing, a new home, a new business, a new family. Memory Frame was thriving. I had a waiting list 3 months long. I'd even hired 2 part-time designers. I was making more than I ever had. But more than that, I was free. Jenna became a true partner in the kids' lives. Olivia stayed on even after she was offered another job. "You're my family now," she said one morning as she handed Jack his breakfast. And the twins, they were happy, safe, curious, loved. That was all I ever wanted. 6 months after the surgery, I received a letter. An actual letter, handwritten. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. My mother. I sat with it for a full hour before opening it. Inside was something I never expected. An apology? Not dramatic, not performative, just raw. "Watching you build a life without us made me confront the kind of mother I've been. I was jealous of your independence. I mistook your strength for coldness, and I failed you when you needed me most. I'm sorry." She explained how my father had taken a job at a hardware store, how they'd sold most of what they owned, how they were finally living within their means. She didn't ask for money. She didn't even ask for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I didn't write back. Not immediately. Instead, I showed it to Jenna, who nodded slowly. "They've been different," she admitted. "Dad had a health scare, chest pains. He's been more quiet since." I stared at the letter again, unsure what I felt. Was this change real, or just another tactic? I didn't know yet. A year after my surgery, I agreed to meet them in a public cafe near my house. Neutral ground. When they walked in, I barely recognized them. My father looked smaller, slower. My mother's designer clothes were gone, replaced by a plain cardigan and worn-out flats. They didn't hug me, didn't try to touch me. They just sat, and my father, for the first time in my life, cried. "I've been a terrible father," he said, "and an even worse grandfather." My mother didn't cry. She just looked down at her hands. "We've been in therapy," she said. "Jenna made us go. At first we fought it, but we've had to face a lot." I didn't rush to respond. I didn't tell them it was okay. It wasn't. But I showed them pictures of the twins. They didn't interrupt. They didn't try to make it about them. And that was new. As we stood to leave, my father asked, "Do you think, someday, we could know them?" I looked at him for a long time. "That depends," I said. "Not on what you say, but on what you do. If you keep showing up humbly, quietly, with respect, maybe." My mother nodded, eyes glassy. "We'll wait." I walked out of the cafe alone. The sun was warm. The air was clean. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt calm. Not because they'd changed. That remained to be seen. But because I had. I was no longer a daughter begging for love. I was a mother protecting peace. And I wasn't going back. I used to think love meant sacrifice. Now I know real love has boundaries. And I'm teaching my kids both. They thought I'd bend, that I'd come back, that my boundaries were just noise. But I meant every word. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And once I stopped handing out love like a debt to repay, I found something better than their approval, my own voice. I lost the version of family I once clung to, but I built something stronger in its place. A home rooted in truth, not obligation. Turns out the scariest part wasn't losing them. It was realizing I'd never needed them to begin with.